There's two ways we can store custom transitions. We can use the default global storage, which in my view is probably the best option, because that allows any custom transition we make to be used in any slideshow in the future. But there is an option called In This Project, which limits the transition to just that particular slideshow you're making. To get access to that transition under those circumstances, you will have to open up your project file. We're going to stay with the global setting, which I think makes much more sense, so let's make a start. We can find our way to the custom transitions via Project Options, Transitions and Manage Transitions here, or we can go to the Slide Options, Transitions, and it's exactly the same, Manage Transitions here. So let's select that and create a transition, the top option. Up here I'm going to create a category of my choice. I think I'll just call this single variant, and we'll call it 001 for want of a better choice of words. In actual fact, maybe it's better if I try to reflect exactly what I intend to create. So let's say 3D and slide. 3D slide. Let's see how that matches with what we're going to create. There you can see the default global storage. There's the other option. We're going to make a single variant. We'll be looking at the other options a bit later. So all we need to do now is to click Edit. And when we do, a familiar window opens up, but perhaps the images within it are not so familiar. Now when you think about it, we're creating a custom transition. That custom transition sits between slide 1 and slide 2. In the Objects and Animation screen, when we create the custom transition, we actually have two holding images. Slide 1 is the landscape, slide 2 is the flowers. And as you can see by me moving the cursor along, there's a very simple custom transition already in place, and all it does is leave slide 2 exactly where it started, and slide 1 just drops down off the screen. So if we go to the second of the keyframes and we go to the Animation tab, we can see what creates that movement. Here it is. We want to remove that because we don't want to use that option in what we're about to make. So I'm going to double click. Now perhaps we can adopt a little bit of a rule here. I'm going to hold my control key and select both of those slides. The rule is this, that slide 1 at its first keyframe really should be fully on screen for obvious reasons. Whatever happens is going to happen between this image, slide 1 being fully on screen, and slide 2 being fully on screen. So slide 2 needs to be fully on screen when we highlight the second keyframe. It isn't at the moment, of course, because we just made an adjustment to the custom transition that was here already, so we've got to make this change as we go along. The other thing you'll notice is we're only working with 2 seconds between the keyframes here, but don't forget the two images we're working on are just holding images. When we apply the custom transition to our own images, we can apply 4 seconds, 6 seconds, as many seconds as we wish. So let's think about what we want to do with that first image here. So I'm going to go to just slide 1 for the moment and the first keyframe. What I'd like to do here is use slide 1 to fold back like a door from this position. But what it means I've got to do is to move the center point to here, both for the starting keyframe and the ending keyframe. So let's go to the start keyframe here. Pretty quick and easy to do, because if we go over to the center option, if I right click over the X here, you can see that I get some presets pop up, and the one I want is -100. Now that steps it way to the right, so I do need to counter that by going to the pan, doing the same thing over the X, right click, -100. And you can see why I've done that and what it's done. It enables us to do that. But of course we need to do the same thing here too. And we need to apply the 3D. They're very quick with the right click, so right click, -100, right click, -100. Now I'm going to put my cursor in the rotate Y. I'll hit my up arrow because that's the movement I want to give this, and I need it to go right round, and that looks pretty good to me. While we're working on slide 1, let's go to the first keyframe and apply some speed. The only thing we've done here is rotate it, so I'm going to suggest we're going to best use, I think, slow down. Okay, let's move to slide 2. What do I want slide 2 to be doing when it's at the first keyframe? Well, I want slide 2 way off on the right hand side here, but of course I can't have that floating down on top of this one with the stacking order I've got, so I can switch these around. So with slide 2 selected, you can either right click and choose order, or just use your control key and page up, and as you can see I've just switched the stacking order of those two images. Now we see slide 2. Now remember, slide 2 needs to be fully on screen at its second keyframe, so that's where we want it there. Here, what do we want to do? Well, I'd like to take a bit of a zoom or zoom down. I would like to apply some Y rotation and a pan off the screen. Maybe that's a little too much Y, and I'll just test this because when we're making a custom transition, it's a little bit of trial and error. We can have a good idea of what we're doing, but we need to have a number of tests because more often than not we're going to need to tweak some aspects of it. Having said that, that didn't work too badly. But do remember, you're watching everything very fast within just 2 seconds. It's going to look much more measured and appealing, I think, when we apply it to 4 or 5 seconds. Now, because that didn't work too badly at all, I'm going to go back to my first keyframe and think about the speed options that I want. But unlike slide 1, where we only had rotate, here we've got pan, we've got zoom and rotate. So let's go to the modifier and animation slow down, and slow down. Now that is our custom transition created, but it does leave lots of black background visible, and you may find that that's fine for what you want. But if it isn't, what we could do maybe is to copy slide 1 or slide 2 so that the background is soft and in the background all of the time when the custom transition is working. Let me take slide 2 for example. I'll right click and choose copy, drop down at the bottom and right click and choose paste. It's going to paste it back at the top, but let's use control page down, so I've got number 2 sitting at the bottom now. First thing I need to do is to take off all of these settings, so that's no problem, is it? We can remove the speeds, although if we've got no animation then the speeds are irrelevant, but I can double click that, double click the zoom, double click the Y, and now I've got slide 2, the second copy of my slide 2, on screen in the background. And as I move my cursor, let's take slide 2. I don't actually need the second keyframe here, so I'm going to delete that. Going to select the first keyframe, just move the cursor along a little bit so I can see the background in context with the images in front, because I felt that I need a little bit of blur. Maybe I'll just drag it out a little bit. Maybe I'll drop the opacity a bit, and I may even want to even take off a little bit of the saturation. Maybe. You can see what I'm doing here. Creating something a little nicer for the background. Let's just take a quick look at that within our 2 seconds. Well, there we have it. Now we can finish off our custom transition by closing the Objects and Animation screen, clicking OK to the Change Transition Effect, and we can cancel this because we've already got it created here, but we'll just click OK. I'm going to allow the first image here to fade up normally. So from this one to this one, that should be enough for demo purposes. I'll go to my slide options, locate my single variant category and my 3D slide, but I'm going to increase this to 5 seconds. And I'm going to increase the slide time as well, I think, to about 12 seconds. Let's put our cursor on the start and press play, and we can take a look at our custom transition, single variant. First image fades nicely. There's the transition we've just created. Not a great deal of time between them, but that of course is for demo purposes more than anything else. Stop it at that point. Let's have a look at it with maybe 4 seconds. And we'll start from this one this time. That works quite well. I think 2 seconds is rather fast for an animation of this type. We're asking it to do an awful lot in 2 seconds. So these sorts of techniques are probably best suited to slightly longer transition times. And I hope you'll agree that doesn't look too bad at all. Now I'm going to include this custom transition with the download. Now that is pretty easy to do. Let's go back to our slide options. Just select the option you want. Choose Manage Transitions and Export Transition. I'm going to move mine to a USB stick so I can transport it to my other computer and include it with the files. Now there is another option within the settings here which is very useful. If you create a custom transition as we have here, and after a day or so you want to make a change to it, then it may be a good idea to go back to slide options to select it. Go to Manage Transitions, but rather than change this particular one, we can clone it. When we clone it, we get 3D slide copy. If we go then to Manage Transitions and change transition settings, first thing we have is the opportunity to adjust the name. So if we wanted the 3D slide to come from the top or something like that, we can make that change, click Edit, we can pick up where we left off, make the changes, and straight away we've got a derivative of the first custom transition we made.